More than 100 bills passed the Illinois House. Among those, there were bills dealing with prevailing wage. There were bills dealing with labor and employer disputes and strikes. One in particular from Democrat Lance Yednock in the state house would ultimately allow for some criminal penalties against employers if they take certain steps against striking workers. And it's kind of fascinating here because there's a lot of pushback at the State House when it comes to penalty enhancements. Having covered the State House now for going on, 9 years or so, it's fascinating to hear the arguments whenever, say, a Republican says we need to enhance penalties on people who commit gun crimes. We need to enhance penalties on people who do smash and grabs, or enhance penalties on this crime or that crime. And there's always been a pushback that penalty enhancements tend to disproportionately impact certain minority groups or might lead to increased prison time and so on. So there's been an apprehension of moving forward with penalty enhancements. However, I think that apprehension has somewhat relaxed a bit. In particular, when it comes to the idea of people who commit the crimes like carjackings, or who commit crimes like, for instance, the issue of smash and grabs. I mean, there's been some focus on that after the past couple of years here. But the issue of labor disputes and what kind of crimes could be alleged against an employer if they somehow intervene in a strike right outside their business. We'll get to the debate in a moment about that and the question of penalty enhancements coming up. But of course, your phone calls as they come in, 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Hey, Bishop.
Hey.
Why do the Democrats want to abolish criminals? I don't understand what they get off on letting criminals. I seen the best bomb the other day. It said, make criminals or a crime again, and it was Sheriff Jack Campbell's name underneath of it, and I'm sitting here thinking, if the sheriff has a sticker that says that, something's wrong.
Well, there's been an effort with criminal justice reforms advanced at the House to, in a way, look more at rehabilitation, more at trying to get people on the right path rather than maybe putting them into the criminal justice system to where they then, you always hear the thing, it's not a prison, it's actually a college for convicts, right? Because then they come out even worse than when they were, and then they would be a recidivist and get back into the criminal justice system. So that seems to be what the impetus is behind not having more penalty enhancements for certain crimes. But is that the best path? Does that actually work? Or is it really just being soft on crime? That's the criticism that Republicans have had for quite some time.
To me, it's basically saying, hey, go ahead and go commit these crimes because you're most likely not going to get in trouble.
Well, they'll get in trouble. They'll get arrested and fingerprinted and processed. But if the no cash bail law gets actually implemented, right now it's been put on hold by the Illinois Supreme Court pending any kind of outcome from when they heard it a couple of weeks ago, the challenge of the no cash bail law, how that's going to impact crime on the streets if somebody gets brought in and, it's a lower level crime, but then they're let out, even if they can't afford bail, you go ahead and you're back out on the streets. What's the recidivism rate going to be like? If you look at how New York handled this, they had some serious problems with it. But that's, that's a different set of crime altogether. I want to focus now on a bill that passed among one of 101 bills that passed the Illinois House yesterday, and it deals with labor disputes between an employer and their employees who may be part of a union that decides to go out on strike and a work stoppage. And some of the criticism of this bill that did ultimately pass yesterday, a bill from Democrat State Representative Lance Yednock. You had Representative Dan Ugasti say that the language in the bill is too loose It essentially, the way Ugasti reads it, is it could lead to charges being brought against an employer simply for going up to the employees that are on strike and talking to them. He worries that the language is way too broad and not defined enough. But then you get into the question of penalty enhancements, and this was brought up by State Representative Patrick Windhorst on the House floor yesterday in debate with State Representative Lance Yednock.
Thank you. Representative, do you have any real-world examples of interfering with, obstructing, or impeding a picket?
I have a particular one that happened this summer. During the course of a legal picket, a legal strike, an employer decided to, over the midnight hours, fill up the right-of-way with rocks, with horse manure, with garbage, put their cars there to keep us from standing there. If we can't stand in the right-of-way, then we have to stand in the street, and you can't do that because it's a safety issue. We've always worked with law enforcement and neighbors to say we'll go somewhere that's safe, but that is the place where we are supposed to be, and that's what happens is unscrupulous employers or people that are part of the strike will fill up the public right-of-way with debris in order to keep us from being there.
And you believe that this bill will cover that conduct?
Yes, I do. That's the intent.
Okay. Do you have any, or in this bill, are there any limits or guardrails as to what can be considered interference, obstruction, or impeding?
I think just past practice in labor law.
And this is setting up a criminal penalty. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's a Class A misdemeanor?
Correct.
And those penalties for a Class A misdemeanor are up to a year in jail, 364 days in jail, a fine of up to $2,500, probation, conditional discharge of up to 2 years. This does set a minimum fine, though, of $500. Is that correct?
That's correct, which is probably the likely outcome.
So, just so we're clear, this is a penalty enhancement.
There's no doubt about that, Representative Windhorst.
No doubt, this is a penalty enhancement. I would point out that members on our side of the aisle put forward penalties enhancements during the General Assembly, and those bills go nowhere because they are penalty enhancements. I have a bill that says if you strike a doctor, that is an aggravated battery. That bill is still in rules. The leader has a bill that if you strike or punch a DCFS worker, that is an aggravating factor, an aggravating sentence. I believe that bill is still in rules. So if we're going to not allow penalty enhancements, let's not allow them. I instead believe if we're going to have penalty enhancements for one side, our side should be able to put those forward, allow for debate and discussion in committee, and allow for votes. That's the proper way to do this. So to the bill, I would encourage a no vote.
So again, you can hear some of the debate and the contention there on how some legislation that Democrats offer with penalty enhancements advance, especially if it favors unions who have substantial amounts of political capital and fundraising that they put towards politicians of their choice versus those employers who may be on the other side of a labor dispute. But when it comes to, as Windhorst pointed out, penalty enhancements for somebody who strikes a doctor, that doesn't go anywhere. Penalty enhancements for somebody who strikes a DCFS worker, that doesn't go anywhere. And these other types of penalty enhancements. So again, just a lot of times people don't get to see what happens on the House floor and the back and forth in the debates because we too often get just small little snippets of bills or of statements or of sound bites, and you don't really hear the true substantive debate. So hopefully that's helpful for you as we continue to track what happens at the Illinois State.